Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Parents Union Nightly Restorative Check-In. As always, I am your host, Marisol Quevedo Rerucha. I am the mother to Camerina, Emilia, and Sofia. I'm the daughter to Irma Nabran, the grandmother to Isabela Luna and Cynthia Iliana, and our grandson who will come into the world on, we're expecting February 18th. And I'm the granddaughter to Camerina, Alejandro, Francisco, and Carmen. As always, I introduce myself in that way for a couple of reasons. And something, we had a show, and I believe it was Judith Yanis, who's one of our delegates, had said, I've arrived. And I think, I've come to really believe that any of the rooms that I walk into, I want to make sure that I've arrived and that I've arrived whole, and I've arrived healthy, and I've arrived really grounded. And part of my grounding is the reminder that the voice that you hear is not just my own. It's not just about my experiences, but really also represents the voices, the hopes, the dreams, the prayers of my ancestors, of my elders, of all those who have joined me on this journey in this life and have poured love, challenge, hope, all of those things. And also reminds me that the work that I do, the spaces that I enter, it's not about me. It's about our future. It's about our future ancestors. And so it always grounds me, and it's a good reminder for me to introduce myself in that way. And I always explain it because my hope is that it will resonate with our viewers, and it will be a way that you also consider to introduce yourself. So thank you. Thank you for always giving me that time. So we've been gone for a week and a half. The last show we had was phenomenal. We had Curly on from BuzzFeed. And on last Wednesday, so a week ago, I had my guest all lined up. We were ready to go. And my computer decided to update. And so it still wasn't done updating until the next day. So she and I talked on the phone, and we were able to catch up. But I will reschedule with her, Lindsay Portnoy. And then this week's guest had a family emergency, so that's why I wasn't on Monday. So as always, my aunt is here. Hi, Yoli. I love you. I love you very much. And so a couple of reminders. So I'm glad that I'm back. I missed you. So a couple of reminders. The town hall is January 7th, and Dolores Huerta is going to be our guest speaker. Please register. All of our events are free. And also as a reminder, please sign up to become a member of the National Parents Union. Everything that we do is free for you. And we have both individual and organizational or business partnerships as well. So for our individual members, they're both very simple applications. But you go on the website right now, both of the applications are in the same link. So the individual member application is first. We ask you a couple of questions, why you want to join us, how you heard about us, and then we get your contact info. And you should receive, I think we're down to about every week sending out the acknowledgement and that your membership was received. And for our organizational members, our partners, you have to scroll down a little bit more on that page, but we ask you for just a little bit more information, like the name of your CEO or the head of your organization and your logo, and just a couple of questions. But neither of those applications should take more than a couple of minutes. So some of the offerings that we have is we have ongoing training. We just finished our trauma-informed peer-to-peer support training, and we have the Winter Advocacy Bootcamp coming up, which is a 3-week program, and it is for families. It is about developing advocacy within your families. And Christina Lassiter, our Director of Policy and Legislation, is leading that. I believe we will either have direct Spanish translation or we'll have another workshop that is in Spanish. I just can't remember the logistics right now. I think though it's going to be at the same time, and there'll be direct professional Spanish translation. So please make sure that you go to the website and sign up for that, for our advocacy bootcamp. And then lastly, we'll be pushing out, so you should see on our Parents Union page, the Health Corps is a nonprofit that was founded by Dr. Oz, but the work that they do is really about teenagers, and it's about healthy choices for teens. They do local work, national work. They're having a big panel on Friday where they're talking about the vaccine. So they're bringing on a couple of doctors, I think 3 or 4 doctors, to talk about the vaccine, and that will also be translated in Spanish. So please just be on the lookout for the National Parents Union page so that you can look and register for that. Again, free. So, and if you don't happen to watch it, we're going to live stream the recorded event next Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern time. So with that, those are all of my announcements. I'm so glad I'm back and I'm with you. And let's do our breathing technique. So as a reminder, we always do our 4-7-8 breathing technique, taught to us by Dr. Anjali, who hosts this show on Friday. And so we inhale for 4 seconds, we hold for 7, and we release for 8. I did a training earlier this week. I was following up with a group. I did restorative practice training with them. And this was just a check-in to see how they're doing. And they were, everybody got to the meeting a little frazzled. So I taught them the technique, and it was really amazing because they immediately felt the benefit. So inhale for 4 seconds. We're going to hold for 7, and we release for 8. And we do this 4 times, and I will guide us in the technique. If for whatever reason you get caught up in either holding, it seems like a long time, or the exhale, just breathe normally and join us on the next round. I recommend this. If you're really stressed out, if you're having a hard time going to sleep, this technique really helps calm you. It helps focus and get you, in transition. So in between meetings. So I love doing this technique before we bring our guests on so that we're focused and we're ready to receive our guests. So if you could please put your feet flat on the ground. If you want to close your eyes and do so, just take a regular breath in and out. And inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Hola, Maritza. It's so good to see you. I miss your smiling face, my friend. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen each other. Thank you for being with us. And I think you're going to really enjoy our guest for tonight. So let me go ahead and bring him on and make sure that it's my head that's being covered by the MPU. There we go. Hi, Todd.
Hey, how are you, Marisol?
I'm so, as I shared with you, I'm so happy to be talking with you. And the reason why, and I think I said this in the description, but there's a couple people I've had on the show that I've never met, but you and I are friends on Facebook. And I think it's because some of the circles, and I love how intelligent you are. And I love the things that you choose to talk about and use your platform on Facebook to talk about issues of social justice and really things that I see that are just about like human beings doing and being the best version of themselves. So, but with that, I just have my guests introduce themselves. So if you could please share anything that you would like about yourself, your family, your passion, the things you love, the things you don't love, work, whatever it is that you want to share.
Sure. Well, I'm going to kind of copy the way you introduced yourself. I'm the father of Madison, Colin, and Sophie. I'm the husband of Anna, the son of Thomas and Nancy Scholl, both lifelong public educators. And I've been in public education for over 25 years. Spent most of that time at high school here in Horry County, which is on the coast of South Carolina. Most people have probably heard of Myrtle Beach, which is where I live. So I spent over 15 years in the classroom, and then about 10 years at a state agency working to recruit and retain educators for public K-12 schools here in South Carolina, and have been doing, part of that work was, retaining teachers, and we have a lot of teachers who are very stressed out. And one of my the passion work is helping teachers address that stress through mindfulness practices. So I've been presenting on that for about the past 8 or 9 years, and leading retreats for teachers as well.
So wow, that's a wow. That's a big wow for me. What is it? So there's a couple things, but I want to get into the mindfulness thing first. So what is it about the mindfulness practice that really speaks to you and who you are? And if you could just tell us the story of that, how you got into the practice.
Sure. Okay. So back in 2001, when I first became a father, Madison was born in February of 2001. I was in about my 6th year of teaching. I was coaching in the fall and the spring. I was announcing all of our home football games and basketball games. And I was a new father, and getting up at 5:36 in the morning to drive her to her grandmother's house, go to work all day, coach after school. And, you get to the end of the day, you're trying to go to sleep, but you've got so much running around in your mind. And over time, there was a sense of feeling overwhelmed. And I think that when you feel overwhelmed chronically, it can lead to anxiety and anticipation anxiety. And then if you're anxious long enough, it can reduce your serotonin levels, and it led to depression. And I did the worst thing that a person who's a hypochondriac can do, which is I Googled my symptoms, and I went to therapy. And
are you a legit hypochondriac, or are you a hypochondriac like me, where I'm
a hypochondriac. I've survived just about everything.
So I think don't let me get a headache, because I'm already writing my will and testament.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's me. So,
okay.
So I'm an anxiety prone person to begin with, and just having all of these responsibilities, and just feeling the weight and the pressure of all of it led to an anxiety disorder. So I went the traditional route and went to therapy, but I kept Googling about how do you kind of deal with anxiety, and I kept coming back to mindfulness and meditation, but my traditional connotation of that was that it was a new age thing, or it was a Eastern religion thing, and that it really wasn't applicable to me. And I didn't see how just the breathing technique that you did, I didn't see how that could possibly help. And so but I'm a curious person too. And so I sat down. I remember the first time I tried mindfulness breathing practice, I sat down in a room and shut the door and shut the lights off. And within a minute, I was more stressed out than when I started. So I kind of gave up, but I kept reading this research and the science was very compelling about it being very helpful for anxiety. And I think for me, it was kind of like learning how to ride a bicycle. And the practices work, but you have to kind of give them time, and it takes a little while for them to click and for everything to make sense. And so it finally did. And it was probably one of the most important things that I did for my mental health, was to learn how to do the mindfulness breathing practices. And it helped me survive and thrive, and eventually went on to become teacher of the year and got that position at the state level. And it was just a really life-saving skill to learn. And so when I had the opportunity to share that skill with other teachers who I saw were suffering from stress, it was a no-brainer for me to share that with them, because it's free, everybody can do it, and it's scientifically validated to work.
So what are some of like the your favorite strategies that you use? Because I think mindfulness, like some people, so we know it's breathing, we
Mhm.
know that there could be other components of it. Meditation, I think can, fit into that mix. What are some of the strategies that you really have gotten, I think that you just know are working?
Well, the meditation practice um, is it does a few things. Number one, it takes time for it to do the work that it needs to do on your brain. There's a whole neural restructuring. My therapist likened it to you're kind of having to delete some old software that isn't serving you well and install some new software. And installing software takes time, and overwriting the programs that you've been running your whole life takes some time. So it's a commitment to doing the practice regularly. But when you do the practice regularly, you start to see and understand where a lot of your stress comes from, which is from your thoughts. So you have a thought about something that happened in your life or that could happen into your life. And this gets in the hypochondria, right? So like, what's going to happen if I get that test and I get this result and then this, and you go down this rabbit hole of,
Well, but then that feeds the anxiety. So that makes a lot
right,
of sense why
right,
like that. Well, and that makes a lot of sense why like the hypochondria that we have, it's based out of anxiety, of
yeah,
that worry and that fear, and then almost like that convincing of something's wrong. And I love what you said, that it really has to do with our thoughts
yeah,
and the things that we tell ourselves. And I think it's so oh my gosh, I use Man's Search for Meaning, Victor, he was in the concentration camps. Franco's a Viktor Frankl, and he said like the last of one's freedom, the last, like, and the one thing that I can keep is how I choose to respond to situations.
right,
You can take everything away from me, but what you can't take from me is how I respond.
right.
And that part of our response is what we think. And it's that narrative, those stories that we tell ourselves, those patterns of thinking. And so I love that you are connecting that with that meditation component also in mindfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. So the meditation helps you sort of see how your thought processes lead down to a road of negative thinking that stirs up emotions, and then it's sort of a feedback loop. So this rumination that we do about our lives can start to spiral into a lot of like these negative thought patterns that we have, and it can become habitual. And so the practice helped me see that, so that as the thoughts started to emerge, I could then short circuit it and say, okay, that's not real. That's just a story my mind is telling me. It's this narrator, this scary narrator that's wanting me to pay attention to this perceived or potential threat. And I don't have to allow that thought to cling to me and pull me into this negative space. I can come back to my breath. I can come back to the present moment. And that is still a work in progress for me, but the practice has made me more resilient to that and made it easier for me to do that.
And you also then made the decision, which I love, which is helping other people in their practice and seeing that stress level that teachers have. And I think now also, so when the Parents Union started, and we started offering all this Facebook programming, and it was in early to mid-March, one of the things, so we have two shows that are still running that are in the morning live, and then like MPU en Español, and both of them have therapists that have been providing parents with social and emotional support. Along with one of them is Dr. Anjali, who hosts this show on Fridays, who taught me that 4-7-8 breathing technique, and she's sharing other techniques because parents right now also, and it was you as a parent, so it was you as a new parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the struggle, coaching all of those responsibilities and making that choice to want to figure out a better way for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that I believe this, and I talk about this in the restorative practice training that I do, and that is that I really believe that each of us is really trying to be the best version of ourselves. And the catch, though, and where the work is in us facing what's keeping us from being the best version of ourselves. because in that space is where our, like, the reflective work, the work, a little bit of what you're talking about, I think, like the understanding that there is a negative voice that's happening in your head that's keeping you, I think also the acceptance and understanding that the way you're perceiving things is impacting you. The way, like that you have a lot of that, that's where you have the control. And I think also in that place is, you know, our ego, self-esteem issues, that in that's the place where that stuff lives. It's keeping us from being the best version of ourselves. Have you been or thought about your journey in that way at all?
I think all of us are processing things that happen to us in childhood. All of us are processing things that have happened to us throughout our lives.
Mhm.
And I have a maybe an unorthodox view of how I view maladaptive behavior. I think maladaptive behavior is just another way of communicating, and if we had a better way of communicating, we would use that way. So all of us are, like you said, all of us are trying to do the best we can and learn from our mistakes. But we are a product of both our DNA and a product of all of our past experiences, and we can't do anything about that. The only thing we can do is right now in this moment do something about it. We can't go back and change it. So that's why I think reconnecting to mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment is so important, because it's the only place where you can make a difference and make a change in your life. It is right now. If we're constantly reflecting and constantly living in the past or constantly worried about our future, we're missing the moment the only moment we have to really make a change, which is right here and now.
And it's those echoes, though, right, of the past, those echoes that can get us caught up and make us forget. And I see that. I love what you said, like the maladaptive behaviors form of communication. I see that, and I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed that I had kids young. I was 19 when I had my first daughter, and also that my daughter, you know, she had my middle daughter had her baby. She was 22, and she has two babies now. But I say that because I've had kids in my life, and so my oldest daughter is 26 and the younger one is 15, but we have a 4-year-old granddaughter and a 9-month-old granddaughter. And I see what you're talking about in the communication of the babies.
Yeah.
Like the screeching, the like that's how they're communicating. So right. Like as a grandparent, and I think also I'm so grateful for my parenting journey, but like that's a reminder to me, like it's not that they're like yelling because they're trying to get on your nerves, like they're communicating to you.
That's right. That's right. And that's what we learn to do from the time we're born, we communicate, and we use the best tools that we've got. If it's screaming, if it's yelling, if it's crying, if it's acting out, that's the tool we use. And a lot of times the maladaptive behavior is a way for someone to communicate their suffering.
Yeah.
Whether it's something from the past or something they're going through now, and they just don't know a better way to communicate that suffering.
So how have you worked through those issues, that childhood pain, the trauma of your life, like the pain of your life? How have you been able to work through it?
I hate to keep hammering it, but the mindfulness practice is what has helped me with that. I mean, I've been to see a therapist on occasion when I'm struggling, and I think one of the things we all need to do is to destigmatize our therapy, or seeking medical help when you when you have an issue that is a mental issue. We think nothing of you've got a sore throat, going to the doctor. They do a test and you have strep throat and you get amoxicillin or whatever, and nobody thinks anything about that. But if you are depressed or anxious, people have this stigma about going to see a counselor or a therapist, and we need to move past that as a society, because I think all of us at one point in our lives or another are going to experience a mental health issue. And and it would be so helpful if we could destigmatize that, so everybody just felt as comfortable going to a therapist as they do to a doctor for a sore throat. So therapy has been helpful. The mindfulness practice, reading, just accepting trying to come to terms and just accept things that have happened. I mean, I've had a overall very blessed and good life. So I don't want to make it out to seem like I've been through all this bad trauma, but
Well,
all
but
all of us
human
do things. Sure.
because as human beings, like we all have pain. And I was, I think also the perspective that I have now, having lived the life that I've led, is also like with our kids. And like my grandbaby yesterday, my daughter came over, and anyway, she yelled at my granddaughter, and my other daughter got really like, she was so hurt and she wanted to protect her and take care of her. And I told her, like, that's her journey. Like, we all have pain from our childhood. Like there's a piece of us, and for some it could be like, oh, my mom yelled at me and it hurt me, and some it could be something else. But like, that's not our job. Isn't to correct that. Our job is to like make sure that she knows that we're on this journey with her and supporting her, and going to help her navigate through the pain and navigate on her journey. But it's not our job to fix everything for them. And as human beings, we've all experienced all the things.
Yeah. I think a lot of our suffering comes from wishing things were different than how they are. Yeah. So when we think about our past and we know that we can't do anything about it, the more you wish that your past had just been different. If it only could have been this way, that's just generating unnecessary stress. And so it's coming to terms and acceptance about what's happened in your past, coming to terms and acceptance about the state of things right now. It doesn't mean that you can't in this moment make decisions to improve your life, but it just means that if the more you have this struggle and wish things were different, the more you're just creating that stress and that anxiety in your own mind. And so having some acceptance and some surrender to what is and what has happened is really, to me, an important way to get mentally well.
I think that what you're saying is really critical. That is so important, because you use that word suffering, and it is a suffering, and it's a suffering that I think with the perspective that you're giving us is unnecessary.
Right.
You know, it is a hard thing to do, to release, because of the desire, because of the want, like to release the way that things should be, as opposed to, as you said, surrender, accepting the way that things are. Right. And I think that's part of what, when I talk about like what is keeping you from being the best version of yourself, that would keep you, because it's you not being like really whole and really like living in, like you said, in the moment, in the goodness of the moment.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think creates a lot of suffering for people is when they spend a lot of time comparing themselves to others. And this is particularly exacerbated in this, social media world, where we see other people posting things and wish we had what they had, and we're comparing ourselves to them, and that type of, again, is not, it's not accepting the present moment for what is not having any kind of self-compassion either. And that's a huge component, is loving yourself and taking time to accept yourself for who you are right this minute, without constantly thinking there's something I've got to do to change about myself, something I've got to take away with. I got to lose weight. I've got to get money. I've got to get this job. I've got to have a partner. I've got to have whatever, in order to feel this sense of worthiness for oneself. And I think that is another, and all of this kind of, there's the pushback is that, oh, well, you're just resigning yourself, and how are you going to change if you don't want to change? And I think we've got to figure out, how do you have goals, and how do you look forward to self-improvement, but not constantly having that carrot that's out in front and saying, well, I'll finally accept myself when this happens, because as soon as you get there, it's going to be the next carrot's always going to be out in front. And that mindset has to start. I think if we start with self-love and self-compassion, then what blossoms out of that is a lot of the right decisions that you need to make for your life anyway. We're just getting it in reverse order. So we need to love ourselves, have compassion for ourselves, get ourselves in a good mind state. And then we tend to make really good decisions when we're there, when we're in that state.
My sister, my best friend, she's my heart sister. Her dad, he's a veteran, he's a Muslim and just a very peaceful human being. But one of the things that he told her, we were doing like vision boards a couple years ago, and he said the only like resolution or the only thing that I commit to every day is practicing loving kindness and nonviolence towards myself and others.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Because we are so violent to ourselves. And when we're not aware, so there's those of us like like part of my struggle has been with my self-esteem. And so like I'm like the words, the harshness, the violence towards myself, very fortunately it didn't come out towards other people.
Yeah.
But for some people it does. For some people it's here and it's out. And so just that taking on that mantra of like practicing nonviolence, like love and kindness and nonviolence towards me, towards self and others. Are there some other either mantras or practices that you use in this idea of like acceptance of self, acceptance of the moment?
So I believe that at the core of all of us lies a very peaceful and happy being. And I think what happens is from the time we're born, that gets obscured and sort of wallpapered over with these layers of identification, and we build up the ego. And part of that is what you're referring to, which is constantly feeling less than others, not feeling like we look good enough or that we're smart enough or that we're wealthy enough or whatever it is that we're whatever the story is that we're telling about ourselves. And we continue to build up this identity. And what I've found is that over the past 10 or 15 years, how I've gotten closer to happiness is not trying to add anything more, but trying to eliminate those wrong ideas about who I am fundamentally at the core. Letting go of these sort of negative narrations that were playing in my head about who I am, but also letting go of getting down to the core identity of who I am, which this is getting into sort of some mystical, esoteric space, and I don't know if we want to go there, but
we can go there.
Just what we are fundamentally is awareness. And if we can get down to that core of just being aware without all these other layers of crap that we put on top of it, when we get down to that core, the closer we get to that core, I think the more peace and happiness start to emerge naturally. It's not, we're constantly looking externally for ways to make ourselves happier. It's that promotion, it's the raise, it's the relationship or the thing that we've been wanting, the new house, the nice car, whatever. And we find that that's a temporary bump in happiness, but it never satiates it. And what I'm finding here in almost year 50 is we got to do the reverse. It's stripping away these identities and getting down to the core of just pure awareness and being happy with the moment just the way it is and swimming with the stream. And getting to that place is just hard because I've spent a lifetime building up this sandcastle of identity and identifying with that and thinking that sandcastle is what's really important, when really what's the only thing that's important is what's underneath all that soul, that awareness.
When's the last time you caught yourself in the struggle? So like you're teaching right now, like you're on you have like your vibe, like there's a lot of practices that you have that I think you have, like you're going to always have to practice them, right, for mastery. But when I think it is so real that the struggle still exists.
Yes.
Because we're human beings and our journey is not finished. Like it's a constant thing that we have to pour into. And it seems like all of the work that we do, all of the leaps that we make in our growth and in our healing, like we get caught up.
Absolutely.
So when was the last time you got caught up? What was that?
Today I've got caught up. So I had a cardiologist appointment. I had a heart attack back in June, and And I've had to go to my cardiology appointment, and the thoughts run through your head like, oh gosh, what is he going to find something? Is it what's going to happen? Is it I mean, all the thoughts go through your head, and you have to just recognize them for what they are, and those the negativity bias dies hard, and I have that very much programmed into my brain is, survive and pass along genes. That's kind of like the evolutionary hardware that I have. And it's hard. And I'm drawn to teachers who are very real about stuff. I mean, I appreciate like the sort of the sages that seem to be enlightened and that kind of thing. But I kind of like hearing from people who are still having the struggle, but are finding some answers and some relief in certain practices and certain sort of ways of thinking about things, because it seems like accessible. Like, I don't know that I'll ever get to enlightenment or anything close to it, but if I can just be a little bit happier and share the tools of how to get a little bit happier, then that's what I'm kind of here for. That's what is sort of my life's purpose, I think, and passion.
One of the things that I've noticed is when I get caught up just in the day, or like I'm taking on, and that I'm very grateful for, is I will recognize when my shoulders are like up to here.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like take a minute. And so I think having a practice of like just, and like taking a breath and taking a moment and recognizing and allowing it's really helpful. And I think about all of those years, right, that were spent without having that. And I think that, our bodies, well, I'm sure you've heard of the body keeps the score. But our bodies take it on. Our bodies take on the stresses, the worry, like all of the things. If we're not figuring out a way to clean it out, to purify ourselves, to cleanse ourselves, and to heal.
Yeah, my kids would be happy to share with you some examples of, when I've lost it and when I've not modeled for them good coping skills. They'll be happy to share with you many examples of that. But I'm trying, I try to acknowledge that with them, because I do want them to sort of recognize it in themselves. As their father, I don't want them to adopt a lot of the bad habits that I have, the sort of mental bad habits that I've had. But I still, it's like I said, it's a program that I'm still trying to overwrite and still pops up. And it's, I think the difference now is where, like, if I had this cardiology appointment 10 years ago, it would have been a day or two of just, anxiety and worry. And for me, it was more like 13 minutes today. So it's hard to get rid of fear and anxiety and worry and sadness and all. And we don't want to get rid of those. We want those things. We're human beings. We want the full panorama of human emotions. But what we don't want is it to become a thing in our lives where it's destroying the joy in each day. So if we can learn these skills to let go of it a little bit quicker, then we're recapturing, we're taking over that territory of our lives that we would have given away to these negative mind states, and reclaiming the positive mind states.
I appreciate that so much, because I think just that, like, it's just another reminder of, like, we are human beings. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, let me go back to I want to talk about the kids, because you had said, like in society, and I agree with you, like therapy wasn't a thing. But I love this generation. I love the millennials. I love the Gen Zers? Like, I love, because they are breaking down the norms of things. And what I really love, my mom just joined us. Hi, Mom. I was talking with my aunt, and my aunt was, I had said something like my daughter had a therapy appointment or something. And she goes, she said, I think it's really great that everybody should have a therapist. She was like, that wasn't something we did. It wasn't something that we talked about, but it's so important. And my aunt is mid to late 70s. I'm sorry, Yoli, I can't remember. I know when your birthday is, but I can't remember what year. But it was so beautiful to hear her say that. And I think also, like, the kids, they're not playing, and they are no longer. And what's really beautiful is that the reason why they're able to do that is because our generation did the work that we needed to do.
Yeah.
And that means that our parents' generation did the work that they needed to do. And even if it may not have felt like enough at the time, like we're all doing the work so that we can now be at this place where, number one, I think they're a very accepting generation, but also very much about their health and well-being.
Yeah. My kids are, and I don't mean this in a falsely modest way, just my kids are far more amazing than I am. I mean, I'm just inspired by all three of them. I love them so much, and they're my teachers, and they are constantly reminding me of, things that I need to do, and sort of techniques I need to remember, and they model for me some wonderful wonderful things, and they're very wise. I do, a lot of people will talk badly about the millennial generation, and I just don't. I'm kind of with you. I don't get it. I see these people as far more accepting. When I look at LGBTQ issues as one example, I see my son is gay, and I see his sisters and his friends all just acting just completely normal. And it's I just am inspired by this generation. I think that they're leading us in many ways. The only thing I would say, caveat I would say, is we know that teenagers are now the number one most stressed out demographic group. We know that student mental health issues are on the rise, and I think we do a disservice when at school all we're concerned about is the grades and the test scores. I think that we're doing a huge disservice to kids by not prioritizing their social emotional wellness.
Yeah.
And that's a big, huge point of advocacy for me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. And that's also something that's really important to the National Parents Union, but important to our work and we'll be doing some work around that in the coming year, and really supporting our parents in becoming advocates. So informed parents about social and emotional learning, so that we can partner with educational systems in providing those comprehensive supports for our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. The kids need, now, I mean, I get on this soapbox a lot. I think that I've this growing sort of thesis that schools are doing, most of the teachers are doing an incredible job in an environment that's not conducive to human flourishing. It's conducive to it's a system that's built to maximize the results of test scores, is really what. And the test was really designed. The tests were designed to help hold the system accountable, but they've become the tail that wags the dog. And the problem with that is when the entire system is built around maximizing test scores, it warps the system in such a way that it dehumanizes the people that are there. And the schools sort of mirror the dysfunction that we have in society, which is we're placing our values and metrics on all the wrong things. Our metrics and our values are all on material items, on money, on finances, that kind of thing, rather than on our well-being. Our well-being, including our happiness, our sense of peace, our sense of equanimity, our compassion for others, our ability to get along with others. Those are the things that to me are hallmarks of human flourishing, and yet they're not measured on the tests, so they're largely put on the back burner in our schools. And I think that's a disservice to young people.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to like the issue with assessments, like as a parent, I want to know how my kids are doing.
Right.
I want to know that the system is serving them, is providing a high quality public education. Like I want to know that. But when the focus is just on the test scores, and you have such that high accountability component without the appropriate supports, and like you're saying, like without that comprehensive look, then you're not looking at individual children.
Right.
Kids become numbers.
That's right.
And that is problematic. And so, really, and there are some schools that are doing phenomenal work with bringing in social and emotional learning, and also looking at like resiliency in kids. The places where it's happening is in alternative schools. There are some phenomenal alternative schools that I've seen that are really looking, because these kids, they meet multiple ACEs factors. They did not do well. Alternative schools, usually older kids that didn't do well in the traditional public school system, high absenteeism, any of those things that you could see, would be challenges for kids, they have. But there have been really great schools that are looking at like resiliency, looking at their social and emotional learning growth. So that is promising. I think that our system definitely needs to break open and look at the whole child. And I think also, as a former, so I'm a former educator and a former principal and director. And I've worked in high school, middle school, elementary school, the county office, juvenile court schools, and alternative charter school. So the other piece is, we really as a system need to take care of our staff, because we need them to be whole and be well and to do their work so that they can support our students in meeting their social and emotional needs. There's a responsibility there. I really feel we have a moral responsibility to provide supports.
Absolutely. No, that's really what has been the focus of my work over the past 8 or 9 years, is getting this help out to teachers, because a teacher who is mentally well and can regulate their emotions and de-escalate situations can model that for their students, and students need those models throughout their K-12 experience. And so that's kind of, I've always felt that you can't really get mindfulness and wellness into the hands of students until it gets into the hands of teachers, because they have to be well and they have to understand these practices on a personal level if they're going to deliver them with any kind of efficacy to students. But no, definitely. And going back to your point, and it's not that we don't assess students, or that we don't take care of the basic skills of reading and writing and stuff. It's just that when data becomes prioritized over the people's humanity, you end up with a dehumanizing system that people feel alienated from, and that's why a lot of students either drop out or wind up with mental health issues, and why a lot of teachers quit or stay but get burned out, because the whole system is dehumanizing it. It gets the priorities wrong. The humanity of the people in that building has got to become first. Their wellness comes first. And then actually the research shows that if you get that right, then the test scores are probably going to go up anyway. But if you're just if you're myopically focused on raising test scores, and you're going to build the whole system around that, and the humanity kind of gets pushed to the edges, that's where I think we run into so many problems. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of teacher attrition. I know we are here in South Carolina, really across the country. I think it's becoming an issue. How do we recruit and retain teachers to a system that largely disrespects and ignores them, and doesn't look at them as human beings, but as folks who are going to help raise the districts or the school's test scores as their primary focus? And I just think we've got to reprioritize things.
Well, and that absolutely is not being student-centered. Like that's not about our kids. And I think that, and we know like who our system was created for, and why the big gaps exist, like the really harmful gaps. And I think also, what you were saying, when people, what we're talking about needs to exist in all organizations and businesses.
True.
I'm sorry, yes. People need to be human-centered. They need and we need to have this deep understanding of our social and emotional selves and our learning in our society, period. And those practices of how to do that, and how to talk to one another, and how to build that workplace culture in all organizations. Because what I have seen time and time again, and just, the experience that I have, and the beautiful family and friends and the network that I have, is that harmful leadership in any single organization, but especially in schools, because we have some different kind of moral imperative, right? But it harms and it destroys, it's destructive. And the issue in education is that when you have harmful leaders or you have teachers who are harmful, that can it can be destructive. And so we absolutely have a responsibility to provide. And I think schools are that space where healing can happen and needs to happen. I think they should be the center of that. And through that is how we get to like that connection. I think what we're talking about with the mindfulness, it's a connection of self, right?
Yeah.
Like connecting that awareness with self so that we can then really connect and see other people.
And it's coupled with, so you get the mindfulness part, but then it's got to be coupled with compassion work. You said that loving kindness work, because when you get that right, then a lot of the things that we're seeing, Paulo Freire is I'm a huge fan of Paulo and his work on pedagogy of the oppressed. And he said basically that teachers in the school system itself is either perpetuating systems of oppression or it's helping students to undo those systems of oppression. And this is where it kind of ties into a very practical outcome. If you do this work, it is about alleviating suffering and helping people with their wellness. But when it's coupled with compassion and coupled with empathy and the ability to see through things through other people's lenses, then you have a chance at undoing systemic racism and other forms of bigotry. You have a chance of really making a societal impact, a positive societal impact. And so that's why, to me, it's so important to get right, because, I've always said, if my kids get straight A's, and they generally do, and they get a high SAT score and they go off to a great college, whatever, but if they're riddled with anxiety, if they can't get along with others, if they have no empathy, then none of that other stuff matters. So this is why, like, I really push and advocate for getting the right things prioritized. And then, it's not at all that I'm against learning. I want my kids to read, and I've got my sons in BC calculus, and, I want them to do all those things, and it's great. But if they're not honest, if they're not compassionate, if they're not good people, none of that matters. So I just wish that we would reprioritize what goes on in our schools, and as a society prioritize the right things.
Some of the work that our system has done that I agree with has been, work around career readiness, career technical education, because I think that's another piece that the school is responsible for. It's helping people figure out what they're passionate about, because the expectation in our society is that we're building kids to go to college and but that may not be their passion. That may not be, I think, really creating that lifelong learner, that person that can explore, that has interest that they can develop. And I think part of that is really starting to know yourself and knowing what you enjoy, what you're good at. And the system doesn't do that with that curriculum, that just comes at you, that you have to learn, that may not make sense to people. And so it's really beautiful, when there are schools, like my daughter's at a creative and performing arts school, which is beautiful. But some kids don't have access to that. And so just that opportunity of developing the self, of an exposure to music, to business, to dance, to, to computers, to coding, to engineering, just that exposure, what is it that you love to do? Because not all kids are going to be the kids. And I think that expectation also, the school, the way that it is set up is not for all of our kids. And I think that is another responsibility that we have is, I think, of course, our kids need to know how to read and write and do math at a high level and critical thinking, and, be very thoughtful. And I think also there's those ways of being with others, I think is really important. But again, what you were saying, building compassion, who they are as human beings, but I think also really who they are.
Yeah.
Is there an artist in there,
Yeah. Yeah. So at the higher end of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. And I think we rarely ever get there in a K-12 education, because of this accountability system it drives lower level sort of development. It doesn't really ever get to self-actualization. And Karl Marx talked about how this sort of the system of economics sort of drives out a person's connection to their I think he called species essence or something like that. But basically, what I got out of that was that we become alienated from ourselves because the system is telling us this is the pathway you've got to go if you want to be considered successful in life, and it may not be what is at the core of that human being's soul. It may not align with that, and so they end up with a lifetime of being misaligned with who they are at their core, because society was telling them that they had to go to a 4-year college or get a job that was, high paying or whatever. And they never got truly connected with what their life's purpose was. And so that is also a reason why mindfulness is so important. And connecting with your inner self and figuring out who am I and what is at my core? What are my values? What is it that's going to make me happy doing that for a lifetime? And get out of this mindset that it's got to be something that's going to make you a lot of money or give you a lot of power, status, or prestige. That it's fundamental to who you are as a human being. It's part of your species essence. And if we can connect students with that and help them get self-actualized, then whatever pathway they choose in life, they're going to find much more fulfillment, and they're going to feel they're going to be aligned mentally, physically, emotionally, because they're doing the thing that sings or resonates with their heart and their soul.
The way that you describe that, like by not doing the work, then like kids are alienated from themselves. And again, that connection back to mindfulness, which is about connecting to self, right? And how like the system can continue to perpetuate that alienization.
No, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, just a whole lot of yes.
Yeah, that's what this is all about. And that's why the core work is getting human beings in touch with themselves, because we're largely taught to look outside of ourselves for answers and for value and for identity, is looking outside of ourselves. And we don't tell kids in school to look inside for anything. Nothing. I mean, the only time they hear that, and this isn't a plea to bring church or violate church and state at all. It's a plea to psychologically, and through what we know about neuroscience and just human flourishing, getting human beings to connect with who they are inside and developing compassion and love for themselves. And then they have it for others. And then we have a society full of people who are loving, compassionate, and connected with purpose, and not, going around acting crazy and hurting other people and hurting themselves by living a life of quiet desperation that Thoreau talks about. So many of us live these lives of quiet desperation because we're not connected with purpose, and because we're misaligned. Our entire lives are misaligned, and we don't figure it out till we're 60 or 70 years old. And then it's too late to go back in time, and we live a life of regret.
But you still have that moment. But if you're really practicing mindfulness and you're 70 years old and you're finally at that point, you still have every moment of your life from that point on. And the way that things are going, like that could be a good 30 years, 35, 40 years, like you still have that moment. And that was something that I'm taking from our conversation, is the reminder of being present, and just like presence, both, our present and our presence. And I just, I knew that this conversation was going to be really meaningful for me. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful. I appreciate it.
For sharing who you are. Thank you for sharing who you are and your words. And I would love to actually have you come back on with your kids or your family. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be fun.
That would be fantastic. So I will definitely send you the invite to do that. Before we go, so we only have like a minute, but I don't care. I really want to hear your thoughts on forgiveness. So your final thoughts, and if you could just embed, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on forgiveness.
The less you believe in a libertarian form of free will, the easier it is to forgive people. That would be my thing is understand that when people do things that require your forgiveness, it's largely a result of DNA and past experiences they've had that have manifested in a behavior that is harmful to you, and they can't do anything about their DNA or their past experiences. So you can either withhold forgiveness from them, or you can give it to them out of, generously give it to them and understand that they're communicating in a way and they didn't have a better way to communicate at that time. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing, especially the more harmful the behavior, the harder that is to do. But you're freeing yourself by doing that.
That's the thing. Forgiveness is about you. Forgiveness is about what you freeing yourself. It's so beautiful to be able to forgive another person, but really it's about you freeing yourself from the pain that they've caused. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Todd. So I'm going to send you, I think you have I'm going to send it to you anyway, the link, because I would love for your family to come on. I'd love to have a conversation with you and talk to your kids.
That's the truth.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Beautiful. I felt it. I knew. And I prayed for you when you had a heart attack.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
But thank you for who you are in this world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. And to everybody who's watching, thank you for watching, and hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
And so Friday, Dr. Anjali will be on, and I will be back on Monday. I think I'm doing the show Monday and Wednesday of next week, and then we'll be on holiday break. But I want to thank you for watching. Please know that you are loved and you are cared for. Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.